everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today in this global US EB-5 webinar. Just a brief background, I would actually just like to introduce what Henley and Partner does. We are the global leader in residence and citizenship by investment. Essentially, Henley has two divisions. One is the private client services, and the other is the government advisory service. Private is actually where I'm from, and we also have a very thriving government advisory service where we actually raise more than 15 billion in foreign direct investment. We're truly global in every essence. We have with more than 60 offices worldwide, and we also have more than 40 residence and citizenship programs. But of course, today we are here to discuss about the US EB-5 program. And as you know, this particular program has actually come under a lot of scrutiny because, not scrutiny, but under a lot of concerns because of the fact that on February 25th, Donald Trump actually made a huge announcement that he was actually going to, launch a Trump Gold Card, which is essentially a US $5 million donation, or you could call it a contribution to the US government. And that's actually created a lot of shockwaves in the EB-5 community. Not only in that, it's in terms of also a lot of clients, and families who I've actually been speaking with that, a lot of people are asking, so what actually is going to have, what's the impact going to be on the US EB-5 program? So before I actually want to say that, I just want to say the EB-5 program has been around for some time. And in the year 2022, the Biden administration actually passed it into law, which it's called the Reform and Integrity Act. And this was approved by Congress. And if any changes happen to the immigration, as well as new laws happen in relation to immigration, it will definitely only be allowed to be authorized by Congress. So that is a given. And that is something that why we've all come together. And I brought a lot of experts today also in terms of, we're going to be speaking on immigration, on how you actually evaluate projects also, and in terms of how taxation is also going to be involved, right? So we're coming together to basically give a perspective of, the EB-5 program is definitely something that has been passed into law, is there till the year 2027, and there are grandfather provisions in place, which will definitely give clients a lot of peace of mind. And as much as I understand there is a lot of concerns of clients who I've interacted with and who I'm consulting also with, especially existing clients and new clients who've just done the EB-5 with me. One thing for sure I can actually, just share based on my experiences, I'm actually seeing, approvals come through even after the Trump announcement on February 25th, and as approvals as fast as a year. And this happened after Trump announced. And also, when clients actually file the EB-5 petition in the previous administration, which is the Biden administration, sometimes when the clients file a EB-5 application, and it took us sometimes few months to get the receipt notice. And I'm starting to see actually, it comes through really fast right now, even after Trump announced, and as fast as 2 weeks. So, as much as I would like to say there is a lot of concern in terms of what's going to happen to EB-5, there's also very good, encouraging, positive news coming out. And this will be further shared by the speakers we have here today. Just want to say, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to just put it on the chat box and we can discuss it in greater detail later on. But first, I'd like to introduce you to George Gainey. He's an immigration attorney we work very closely with. It's his own firm, Gainey Law. And he is basically going to speak about it from an immigration standpoint. George?
Yeah, thanks, Shalu. If you could maybe just let me share my screen here. I'll get a deck going.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so thanks again, Shalu, for that nice introduction. I'd just like to start by thanking you and the whole Henley and Partners team for having me here today. It's a true pleasure. As Shalu mentioned, my name is George Gainey. I'm a partner at Gainey Law Group. We're a US-based immigration law firm that services private clients, their families, and their advisors. Immigration is very deeply personal. It also requires us to think very strategically. And so with policy shifts and changes of administrations, geopolitical trends, including, the so-called gold card gaining traction. It's very important for us to be fluent in what's possible and to know where red flags might come up. So I thought today we could walk through some of the current challenges in the U.S. immigration system, highlight viable alternatives, and hopefully give everyone tools to better navigate the U.S. immigration system. Looking forward to this conversation, and as Shella said, welcome any questions at the end. So let's get started. Today, we will touch very briefly on student visa issues right at the outset, just because that's what's in the news these days. We'll talk about the famous gold card proposal, talk about what it would take, and there we'll touch tangentially on something that the inestimable John Shoemaker will also speak about. We'll compare the gold card as proposed to EB-5, and then we'll just very quickly look at some basic EB-5 requirements and a brief overview. So just right at the outset, I wanted to talk about the student visa issues that are in the news a lot and that are affecting a very small percentage of students inside the United States. And basically what's happening is some students are having their SEVIS record terminated by ICE. Other students obviously are being detained, and the US is seeking to deport them. And generally speaking, this is affecting students who are very deeply involved in some of the Gaza protests that have been in the news, students who have had criminal issues in the past, or other police interactions where their fingerprints were taken, and then other students who are alleged to have committed some type of student visa violation. We've talked to a lot of these students who have had their SEVIS records terminated, and this is the trend that we're seeing along with what information we're receiving from organizations like the American Immigration Lawyers Association and just other fellow immigration attorneys in the US. So again, I just want to put a chart up that tries to contextualize who's being affected by this. It's not to minimize the impact that a SEVIS termination, justified or unjustified, could have on a particular student. It's just to try to give an idea as to, the population that's actually being affected. So here we can see on the right-hand side that I think last year it was the annual record for the number of international students in the United States at about 1.13 million. And just based on some information gathering that a couple organizations have done in the United States, it seems like about 4,000 international students have been affected by these SEVIS terminations or having their visas revoked. So again, that's not to try to minimize the impact that this could have on a particular individual. It's just to try to give a picture of what's actually happening inside the United States with respect to students. Another item that's been in the news is the gold card proposal. So I thought it'd be helpful just to talk about the features of the gold card and to look at what those actually are. So the investment amount is a $5 million payment directly to the US government. Just to take a step back, all of this information has been gleaned from press conferences and public statements that people in the administration have made. But none of this is official. Nothing has actually been published. There's no written guidance. So this is all just gleaned from information that anyone on this call could access merely by consuming media. So it's thought to be a $5 million payment directly to the US government, probably a check or wire to US Department of the Treasury. The intent of the program is to reduce the national debt. There's no requirement to create or preserve jobs. It should provide a pathway to US citizenship, tax implications, which John can probably speak to. There would be tax on US income, but non-US income would not be taxed. That's a very important distinction. And as to the program status, again, this is just a proposed plan that was announced in an Oval Office press conference in February of 2025. So what will it take to get all of those features actually available and get the gold card up and running? Based on sort of consensus in the legal community, it'll require legislation. The gold card is probably not something that the Trump administration can implement simply through executive order. that can be contrasted with lots of other, actions that they're taking, immigration, tax, and otherwise that can be impacted by executive orders. But something with this scope um, is outside the realm of what could be implemented via executive order. So it'll almost certainly require some legislation. Controversies will need to be addressed in that legislation. Things like how are we going to vet individuals? What is the source of funds analysis going to look like? What are the actual tax exemptions going to be? If passed, a government agency has to be designated to actually administer this program. So is it going to be the Department of Homeland Security? Is it going to be the Department of Commerce? Is it going to be Treasury itself? Agency has to create forms so that people can actually, apply for this immigration option. People have to be hired to process and adjudicate these applications. I know there was some mention of, Doge or Elon Musk creating some software, but with history as our guide, we know that, individuals are going to have to look at these on a case-by-case basis. Formal and informal rules have to be adopted and implemented by that agency. Security vetting protocols have to be developed, and then the program can be launched publicly, accepting applications. So from start to finish, we can see that it's a concept that exists. It's a goal of the Trump administration, but there's a bit of a road that needs to be traveled before this program can actually be implemented and the gold card can become reality. So just taking a look at the gold card proposal versus EB-5, which is the go-to US residency by investment option that's out there today. So again, gold card's a $5 million payment directly to the US government. EB-5 is a minimum $800,000 investment with a privately held entity. And Min, we'll speak about that entity and how it's structured. So it's an investment. EB-5 is an investment. It's contemplated that it's going to be returned to the individual investor after a 5 to 7 year period, generally. The use of funds isn't to reduce the national debt; it's to stimulate the U.S. economy through job creation. And hand in hand with that, there is a job creation requirement. So an individual needs to create or preserve at least 10 full-time jobs in the United States. Path to citizenship also exists with EB-5. It's a green card, so that automatically puts a person on a path to U.S. citizenship if they want to pursue naturalization in the United States. Tax rules for green card holders are very, very clear, subject to U.S. taxation on global income. And this was, EB-5 and the Regional Center Program were established in 1990 and have been reauthorized through the end of 2027. So, we can see here that the Gold Card program, again, all the information in that yellow column, that's derived from, public-facing statements. There's nothing actually on the books. EB-5, it's been around since 1990. There was a reauthorization that happened in 2022 that also had some very important reforms to the Regional Center Program in a very positive way. And so EB-5 is, squarely on the books. What this means generally is that the Trump administration is focused on investment migration inside the United States. And so there may be changes that could happen to EB-5 in the future. For now, the gold card is more of a proposal. It's more of an idea. It hasn't really taken its full form yet. But we can see that EB-5 is potentially going to be impacted by this gold card proposal. So just something to keep in mind when clients are thinking about their plans, thinking about timelines, and thinking about actually making a decision. Thought it might also be useful to talk about, EB-5 requirements in a little bit more detail. So as previously mentioned, there are two main requirements. One is the investment of $800,000 in the United States. The other is the creation of 10 new full-time jobs. That $800,000 EB-5 investment, obviously, or maybe not obviously, has to come from a lawful source. Needs to be invested before submitting a visa petition. So it's sometimes clients think, well, I'll file my visa petition, I'll get my green card, and then I have to make my investment. That's not the way it works. You make your investment up front, and then you file your visa petition. And the funds have to be invested personally by the applicant. We can use a trust structure, but I just mean to say here that we can't have an entity, a non-US entity, make the investment on behalf of an individual. It has to be the individual, his or herself. The funds can be acquired through a gift, inheritance, loan. We just need to fully document the source of funds and all the transactions, sort of surrounding it. So again, big requirement number one is that $800,000 investment. Big requirement number two is the creation of 10 new full-time jobs in the US. Hiring 10 people on payroll in sort of like a startup business in the United States can be very complicated, especially if an individual is sitting outside the US. And so Congress created something called the Regional Center Program in an effort to make it easier for individuals to pursue an EB-5 visa and to stimulate, lots of economic activity in the United States. So this slide here just tries to capture how a regional center project is structured. And again, Min from Can-Am will explain what a regional center is and how they work in a lot more detail. But suffice to say that when making an investment through a regional center, which I think probably 9 out of 10 clients end up doing, it's a passive investment. The client doesn't have to be involved in the day-to-day. They're not, hiring people, firing people, doing financial projections, running a business. It's a passive investment, typically that is ultimately loaned out to a third party who's going to develop some type of real estate asset in the United States. In terms of processing, there's a very important distinction between if an individual is going to process their EB-5 visa petition from inside the United States, or if they're going to do it from outside the United States. So in every green card process, and again, EB-5 is a green card process, there are two phases. There's the petition phase, and then there's the application phase. So at the petition phase, everybody does something different. This is the phase where an individual says, here's how I specifically qualify for a green card under the Immigration and Nationality Act. So EB-5, for instance, when you file your petition, you demonstrate that you made an $800,000 investment with lawfully sourced funds. And that investment is going to create 10 new full-time jobs in the United States. So that's the petition phase. At the application phase, everybody does something different. Everybody does the same thing. Petition phase, everyone does something different. Application phase, everybody does the same thing. It's a standardized process to make sure that individuals are admissible to the United States. So it's a medical exam, background checks, biometrics are taken, biographic documentation is provided, and the like. So petition phase, everyone does something different. Application phase, it's a standardized process. There are two ways to complete the petition and application phases. One is through something called consular processing. The other is through something called adjustment of status. In a consular processing scenario, the client is outside the United States. They file their visa petition. They wait for it to be approved. Once it's approved, they go to a US embassy or consulate abroad and they complete the application phase there. If an individual is inside the United States with a visa, so for example, a student visa, an H-1B visa, an L visa, they can file their petition and their application at the same time. And they can also apply for work and travel authorization. So this is a very popular option, again, with our clients who have kids who are in the United States on student visas, or people who are in the US already on some type of work visa, and they want to get onto a green card path without depending on their employer, either because they just want to be independent of their employer, not dependent on their employer for a green card, or because there's a significant backlog in the other employment-based green card categories. So we can think of it as consular processing. I'm going to file my visa petition. I'm going to wait outside the US, or I'm going to travel back and forth to the US, and then I'll ultimately complete my green card processing at a US consulate or embassy abroad. Adjustment of status, I'm inside the United States with a visa, and so I'm going to file my petition and application at the very same time, and then I'm going to be able to have work and travel authorization while I actually wait for my green card to be issued. Then this slide tries to, encapsulate the whole green card process through EB-5 and how it works. So Again, two main requirements: $800,000 investment, creation of 10 new full-time jobs in the United States. The vast majority of clients make an investment with a regional center. That regional center allows the clients to make a passive investment. The regional center calculates jobs that are created indirectly or jobs that have been induced in a local economy. Because we have that job creation, the 10 new full-time jobs per investor, that renders our EB-5 visa our green card. Like I said, we're based in Washington, D.C. We're about maybe a little less than a mile north of the White House. That doesn't mean that we can walk into the Oval Office and pick up green cards, and definitely not gold cards as of today, but being in DC definitely has its advantages. I just want to say thanks again to Shalu and to my fellow panelists for having me here today. And with that, I will stop my screen share and turn it back to you, Shalu.
Yeah, thank you so much, George. And, again, thank you so much for explaining, obviously, about the EB-5 process. But yes, again, as how George has highlighted, whatever information we are giving on the gold card is really public information that is available to everybody. The details of the gold card have not been fully revealed yet. So we are just trying our best to, tell you based on what information that is made available publicly. Now, the next speaker is Min Wu. She is the head of sales at Can-Am. Can-Am is, one of the regional centers we work very closely with. They are headquartered in New York. They have a presence, a office here in Singapore. And, one of the most important aspects about EB-5 is where is that 800,000 going into? What kind of projects are available? And, Min is here to tell us more about it. Min.
Thank you, Shalu, for the kind introduction. I really enjoyed George's presentation myself, actually, because it's at a high level really addressed a lot of the current issues that we've been discussing over the past few weeks, and also the questions that we've been getting from our clients. The EB-5 program has been around since the 90s and become really, really popular around the world in the early 2000s. I think one of the key words that we keep hearing when we talk about the gold card is legislation. So in contrary to the gold card proposal, which we know very little detail as of now, the EB-5 program is a legislation that's been passed by the Biden administration in 2022 and will remain valid until 2027, until the Trump administration managed to push through a new legislation to either launch gold card officially or make any changes to the EB-5 program. Obviously, Can-Am, as one of the largest EB-5 regional center operator, we are monitoring the situation very, very closely. We do work with some of the top immigration law firms in the U.S., including George. A lot of our clients are working with George to complete their immigration petitions at the moment. We're in touch with some of the top lobbying group in the U.S. just to make sure that if there's any information on the gold card, any draft legislation that's been released, we will be able to get on top of it right away. I do want to assure some of our clients that has just completed their immigration process with us, you do not have anything to worry about, because your petition, your right to the green card, to the EB-5 immigration program has been protected under the current EB-5 legislation. So you just have to continue to go through your immigration process, and your status in the U.S. will be protected. Yeah. So Can-Am, we've been in the immigration investment business for a very long time. Our firm is headquartered in New York. We do have a lot of offices around the world, in China, in Singapore, in India, and in Vietnam. We were founded in '87, and we shifted our focus entirely to EB-5 since 2002. So we've been sponsoring large-scale EB-5 project for over 20 years now. As the largest and the most successful EB-5 regional center operator, we are very proud to assure our investor that every single EB-5 project that Can-Am has launched and has submitted to USCIS for approval, we have a 100% approval rate for our project, meaning that all our project has meet the EB-5 program requirement, and more importantly, has meet the job creation requirement to ultimately give our investor family their permanent green card status in the US, which is very, very important to our investor. I think a lot of the discussion we hear on Gold Card right now is that it's a $5 million donation to the U.S. government to help reduce the U.S. debt. So EB-5 is completely different, right? I think George mentioned that right now the minimum investment requirement for the EB-5 program is $800,000. So this $800,000 is to be invested into a commercial project. Often, these commercial projects can be in real estate, can be in infrastructure, can be in industrial project. But, of course, as an investment, it has some risk. But ultimately, the way we structure these investments is to pay back our investors $800,000 at the end of their immigration process after they receive their green card. So you can see the difference here, and the $800,000 need to be clearly documented to show that it's investors, legal income. But the purpose of this investment is to get your green card and safely return your capital. And this capital repayment is what really sets Can-Am apart from a lot of other regional center operator, because the way we structure our investment product is extremely conservative, and we work with some of the top tier project operators in the US to make sure that the EB-5 project we present to our investors are as safe as possible. So over the years, we have already completed 52 EB-5 projects. These are usually loan investment. So once they reach the loan maturity, we receive the payment back from the project borrower, and we repay that money to our individual investors. And we have repaid over $2.5 billion back to our investors globally. And I believe that's the best repayment track record in the entire EB-5 industry. Yeah. So another thing that make EB-5 program, the US EB-5 visa program, unique from a lot of other resident program that Henley actually cover and familiar with, is that the unlike other countries, a lot of countries in Europe that allow you to buy a property to gain residence to the country, the US is completely different. We want the EB-5, the capital our investor invest goes into the real economy. So the EB-5 investment is actually structured as very often a private security investment. So Can-Am, as a regional center operator, we are also a fully regulated financial service company in the U.S. We are a FINRA registered broker dealer, as well as a SEC registered financial advisory firm. This gives us, the full license to advise our client, no matter they're inside the United States or outside the United States. Also to issue this type of investment, the EB-5 investment, for our global investor community to consider. So George mentioned that, what is a regional center, right? So ultimately, regional center is a designation you apply and receive from USCIS. And once you receive this designation, a company like Can-Am can then sponsor an EB-5 project in that region. So back in 2002, so Can-Am established our first regional center in collaboration with the Economic Development Agency of Philadelphia. So we started in Philadelphia, and now we actually manage 11 regional centers. We have 11 regional center designation that cover 33 states of America. So this gives us a very broad coverage for project selection purpose. We can select commercial project in these 33 states that we cover to present the best project we can find on the market for our investors. As an investment management firm, the most important thing is our track record. Whenever an investor consider to apply for EB-5 visa, the first thing, when they reach out to a regional center is to know the regional center's experience and track record in the past. So Can-Am, as part of the requirement of the USCIS at the EB-5 program, as well as us operating as a U.S. broker-dealer, our track record, meaning that all the conditional green card our investor receive every year, as well as permanent green card and capital repayment we made to our investor every year, we do go through an independent audit of these numbers. So all the green card that we have received over the years, all the repayment numbers we share with our investors are audited numbers. And we have just completed our 2024 full year audit. So if you are interested in receiving report and learn more about our past project and track record, you can reach out to Henley to receive this report. So one of the questions that I often get when investors first start to learn about the EB-5 program is, what kind of project would qualify as an EB-5 project, right? So Can-Am, we are independent regional center. Essentially, we are our investment management firm that specializes in EB-5. So all the project you will see from us, we don't do the project ourselves. We simply select commercial project that are available in the U.S., right? We make sure that these investments are structured in a way that meet the USCIS, the EB-5 program requirement. It will be able to create the jobs through construction spending to guarantee our investors green card. So the project partners that Can-Am work with, because our background, we started with a public agency. We started with an economic public agency in Philadelphia. So over the years, we have diversified our partners. As of now, I think that there's four types of project that we often do. One is real estate development. We do a lot of office project. We do a lot of hotels and residential project, which is very common for EB-5. But other than that, we also collaborate with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. These can be utility companies, like entertainment companies. EB-5 are used for a specific commercial project that the company might be doing. We have done movies. We have done transportation, like train lines in Florida. We also collaborate with a lot of U.S. investment management firms, such as Fortress and Searchlight, and they invest heavily in the infrastructure space. A lot of the infrastructure, transportation, and energy related. Last but not least, we work with a lot of public agencies and universities to participate in a lot of student housing projects and in a lot of the science buildings that these universities do. So, so in terms of where are we with program right now and any of the pending potential change that the gold card might bring. The first I wanted to, as I assured our investors earlier, that if you have already completed your initial I-526E petition to start your EB-5 immigration journey, you have nothing to worry about. Right? We have continuously to see approvals from USCIS, even after Trump took over the office, after the gold card proposal has been floated by Lutnick. We actually have not seen any slowdown in terms of the adjudication time from USCIS. These both in terms of the project approval time as well as investors' individual green card approval time. Since 2022, because the benefit of concurrent filing, which I think George touched upon a little bit. So the majority of our investors now are international students as well as H-1B visa holders who are already studying and working in the U.S. And the key benefit of the EB-5 program right now is through change of status, through the filing of change of status. This gives them instant legal status in the U.S. And also usually within a 6-month period, it allows these applicants to have full work permits in the U.S. and have the travel freedom to go in and out of U.S. Because this benefit, the EB-5 program has been extremely popular since the reauthorization in 2022. Just sharing data from Can-Am side here, since 2022, we actually have over 1,200 investors has already submitted their EB-5 petitions with the Can-Am project. So the program is extremely popular. And with the pending change, we don't know when, we don't know how, but we assume that the Trump government will carry through and eventually launch the Go Card at some point. But during this period, what happened is we have seen a lot of our investors accelerated their decision-making process, decided to pursue EB-5 petitions for usually for their children who are studying or working in the U.S. to make sure that they get the petition in before any change to the EB-5 program happens. So that's why a lot of the projects that we launch now do get subscribed very quickly. As I mentioned, it's going to be a lengthy process if the Trump administration wanted to make the Go Card happen. Does that mean that EB-5 program will be completely replaced by the Go Card? We don't know. But very likely these two programs actually will, exist in parallel because we do believe that different features of this program will attract to different high net worth individuals. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Go Card will completely replace EB-5. But this is definitely a period that everybody in the industry, the lawyers, us, we are very much paying close attention to any news that come out of the administration, and we'll make sure to keep our investor updated. I'm going to hand the mic back to Shalu and look forward to any of the discussion we might have from the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Min. Yes. So, that's actually a very, very good understanding of how the projects, the funds actually invested into project. And I just wanted to, highlight what Min said, that the profile of mainly our clients are, parents wanting to send their children to study in the United States. Because let's face it, US still offers world-class, first-class education. And I see a lot of my clients, especially parents who I work with, US is the number one, like the preferred destination to send their children to study in the United States. And that's why at Henley and Partners, EB-5 is just probably one facet of, what we do. We literally provide a comprehensive service. We also have our education service where we help, parents, put for placement of their kids into private schools as well as colleges and universities. Then we work with people like Can-Am also to where the funds are actually invested into. And then the next speaker is John, somebody who also I work with very closely, because I don't think any client can actually look at EB-5 without fully understanding tax. And the US tax system is indeed very, very complex. So, with that, I will hand it over to John. John? I think John might have, John, are you there? Maybe just. I think he might have actually dropped out of the webinar. I'm not too sure about what happened to him. But in any case, what John is actually going to be talking about is on the taxation bit. And I actually expected him to, talk more about, especially with the gold card. And as I mentioned, we don't really have a lot of details about the gold card. But I think what the biggest carrot that Donald Trump actually put forward is that with the gold card, there would be like people who come into the US, especially wealthy people who come into the US, they would be essentially creating jobs. They would actually be subjected to only US tax and not worldwide tax. So here we have John. Yes.
I'm so sorry, Shalu. I don't know why. I'm having a couple technical issues here, but I'm here, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak on today's webinar. And I know I have the driest and most depressing topic, tax. So I'll try to keep it short and directed so that those on the call can have a few key takeaways, either to consider themselves or to discuss with potential clients. As George noted in his comments, it's very important to understand that the various immigration pathways that can be under consideration can have vastly different tax outcomes. And that's because at its core, the US system is a worldwide taxation system with both income and transfer tax elements. But whether it's an F1 student visa, where there are exemption from days counting towards becoming an income tax resident, or now the proposal on the other side of the equation, this golden visa, which could potentially limit income tax exposure to US sourced income and not worldwide income. It's very important to understand the US rules and which rules will apply for a chosen pathway. And in doing so, I think it's also important. I think most people are aware of the worldwide taxation element of US that gets a lot of discussion globally. There's one factor that I find is not as understood, but is equally important, which is when you are subject to that worldwide income tax, it's US definitions that apply, and those may not line up with definitions in other jurisdictions. So take, for example, my personal situation. Lived and worked in Singapore for over 9 years. From a US perspective, includable in my definition of income were capital gains. So if I bought a stock for $10, it rose to be worth $30 and I sold it. The US defines that $20 increase in capital value that I realized when I sold that asset. They define that in income. Singapore does not. So if I'm in Singapore, I buy shares of Temasek for $10, they go up to be worth 30 and you sell them. It's not includable in the definition of income in Singapore. You would pay no income tax in Singapore. And so it's important to understand when you're doing this planning. It's worldwide exposure from the US, but it's also US definitions and US accounting methodology that will apply. So it's very important to have the proper advisors in place that can educate you on the definitions that'll apply to your situation and can analyze your financial portfolio to make sure you have a sense of what you're bringing into the system or what you might acquire while you're in the system and how that will be defined from a US perspective. Residence start date is another key factor to discuss with yourself or with advisors, because there is a lot of opportunity to do financial and tax planning before the official start date in the United States. And the official start date can vary whether the individual is going to meet the substantial presence test, basically spend more than half the year in the United States, or they're taking up a green card, lawful permanent resident status, or even perhaps going through a naturalization procedure, which from what we know now with what's been spoken about, and as George correctly mentioned, all we're dealing with now is kind of public comments, not rules and regulation drafts that have been released to us. But everything we've seen in that is that that's leading towards citizenship and potentially a naturalization that would occur. So different resident start dates for the various procedures that you might go through to have the status to live and work in the United States. So we're going to be careful about getting good advice on knowing when your exposure starts so that we can do everything we can optimally up until that date to minimize what you might be bringing into the system or what you might hold while you're in the system that could be treated negatively. As I mentioned along those first 2 points, when we're dealing with the gold card approach, it's just a proposal at this point, and it's not even in writing yet per se. So we'll be very, very careful that everyone understands the difference between knowledge and speculation. There are times when speculation from an informed advisor can be very helpful. So George and I on this call have a lot of experience in monitoring these developments, watching the public comments, talking to colleagues and advisors that are dealing with the government. There is an element of expertise that can aid you with speculation, but speculation can only go so far. True knowledge and legal advice and tax advice that you can rely on can only be based on published and approved rules and regulations. So we want to be very careful when you're trying to analyze which pathway is best for you. Understand the distinction between, say, an EB-5 program that has clear rules and regulations. You can receive a tax or legal opinion based on that versus speculation or conjecture, which still might give you an advantage in knowing when or how to approach a pathway, but is not the same as the opinion that you would get on clearly published rules and regulations. I think that leads nicely to the fourth point about flexibility. The key thing to stress in these times is that there's no reason to stop. There's no reason to put your plans on hold per se. But when you do look at what paths are available to you now, make sure you understand resident start dates from them and whatever actions you're taking, whether that's selling off or deferring, restructuring, filing entity classification elections to avoid negative outcomes, setting up trust structures or other holding structures, maybe having certain family members not included in applications. All of these actions should have a flexibility built into them. They won't all be able to be undone at the drop of a hat. That will vary, but all of them should be entered into with a mindfulness that you have to build in some flexibility if things change so that you can, in the best case scenario, pivot to a more efficient pathway, or in a worst case scenario, unwind something that is no longer as valuable or efficient to you as it may have been in the past or was contemplated under the rules at the time that you initially made your application. The last thing to mention from a tax perspective is to think long term. And I know this is contrary to the way that human development is happening right now. All of us are inundated with messages on social media that immediately grab our attention. All of us are looking at markets where quarterly earnings reports and the month-to-month rise and fall of a market economy drives our investor perspective. But when you're dealing with these types of immigration procedures that can have very profound tax and financial consequences, I think it's very important to try as much as possible to set aside or to balance that short-term view and make sure you're looking at long-term and sustainable actions. So don't enter into trust planning or nominee relationship holding unless you can see a sustainable pathway that is financially solvent for you going forward, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've expended a lot of time, effort, and money on planning or structuring that immediately gets undone and now you've lost money on it. So try to think longer term versus short term. The last thing to mention on that fifth point about thinking long term, though, is there is a 5 to 7 year window when someone is entering into the US system, depending upon their pathway, where you want to set a tickler in your brain that after 5 years of being in the US system, you want to reevaluate, okay, am I dedicated for the long term? Or could I take advantage of an opportunity to make an exit or a shift before certain consequences kick in? And I'm mostly talking about the current exit tax regime in the US. It's too complex to get into in detail on.
Sorry, I think John has I'm not able to, I think he's having some technical issues. Apologies for that. I think we'll actually go right now to the Q&A. So the first question that we have is, are there any restrictions for certain nationalities, Iranian passport holders and dual nationals, Iranian holding Turkish or Dominican passport? George, if you could just help to answer this first question. George?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm
Yeah.
unmuted now. So
Yeah.
there are no restrictions on nationalities that can participate in the EB-5 and regional center program. The question kind of like hints at an important distinction between, what passport you hold and, where you were born. So the important consideration for US immigration purposes is where you were born. So for example, if you hold you were born in Iran, but you now hold a British passport, you're still considered Iranian for US immigration purposes. And so we do a couple things when, an individual is from, a country that is subject to US sanctions. So first we run through a list that the Department of Treasury publishes related to entities and individuals that are subject to specific sanctions, make sure that both the source of funds aren't involved with any of those entities and that the individual themselves doesn't appear on that list. And then depending on the circumstances, we may need to apply for something called a specific license from OFAC in order for the individual to actually make their investment if they're from Iran. But a lot of times, there's a general license that's available, meaning we don't necessarily need to, ask for special permission from the Department of Treasury. So again, it's where you were born. That's the important consideration for U.S. immigration purposes, especially when we're talking about individuals who were born in India, China, Vietnam, countries where there's historically been a really big demand for EB-5 because there's only a certain number of green cards available per year in the EB-5 category, and demand has generally outstripped supply, and so lists start to build if there's an overabundance of demand from individuals who are born in a certain country. So no restrictions on any particular nationality. Holding another passport, having dual nationality, that's not a problem. You can become a US citizen and hold, as many nationalities as you want from the US side. There's no problem. So that's, what we look at when people are asking about dual nationality and, if they were born in a certain country.
Thank you so much, George. The next question I'll move on to. What happens if we do not hear about the approval within 12 months? What is the time frame after petition is filed? If you could also answer that question. Yeah.
Yeah. So generally speaking, we have found that within about a year, investors and clients who have invested in projects in rural areas can expect to have their 526E, which is the petition. So you'll remember there's a petition phase, then there's an application phase. For those clients who invest in a rural area, we expect them to have an approval within about anywhere from like 8 to 12 months, I would say. So if you don't hear back as to whether your petition's been approved and you made an investment in a project that's located in a rural area, I don't think there's a lot to be done, because the question was, what happens if we don't hear about approval within 12 months? What's the time frame
Yeah.
after petition is filed? So again, it depends on your nationality and the location of the project that you invested into. Some clients, if the petition phase drags out for a very long period of time, some clients pursue something called a writ of mandamus, wherein they sue the federal government and they ask a federal judge to compel the government to make a decision, not to compel the government to make a particular decision, but just compel the government to like make a decision. But 12 months, that's like on the very, very short end of what we would consider for a writ of mandamus. So what happens if you don't hear about an approval within 12 months? I would say stay in touch with your immigration attorney and just be prepared to be patient and wait for a bit more time. This is assuming you filed in a rural project. But if you filed in a high unemployment area or even a non-TEA project and you're from a country that historically has been backlogged, I would say it could take up to 18 months, maybe longer, for you to actually get an approval.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. And I think the next question is, what are the current timelines for approval for all stages of EB-5 once petition is submitted? Following that, the same question is, how are current EB-5 approved families dealing with travel concerns in the current political climate? Yeah, I think this is a very, very valid question with a lot of, clients actually ask us.
Yeah, for sure. So on the second one, I was trying to look at some statistics as to how many people travel to the United States on a monthly basis. I think it was like 4 million in March of 2025. And so kind of similar to the student visa issues, there probably have been a select few incidents that have happened at the airport. Whether or not those types of incidents happened under a different administration, I can guarantee you they did happen under, the Biden administration or the Obama administration or, the Bush administration. Like, we can go way back in time. Is there sort of like a more aggressive posture at the airport? Are the immigration agencies feeling more empowered to, pursue enforcement actions? Probably. But I think if you statistically look at, what's happening when people are traveling and the number of people who are traveling to the United States, the likelihood that you're going to have a real material issue is extremely low. As we saw with the student visa thing, I think it's like maybe 0.3% of all students have been affected by all international students have been affected by any of these Trump administration actions. So having said that, we just prepare clients to, for, questions that might come up at the airport, questions that might come up during a visa interview, so that, clients feel comfortable and, safe when they're traveling to the United States. Regarding current timelines, it depends if an individual is pursuing consular processing or adjustment of status. Min might be able to comment on this as well, because they have, like a critical mass of clients, of investor clients. But consular processing, it will depend on your embassy or consulate. But I generally tell clients you can expect the whole process from when you file your petition, you get your approval, you move on to complete consular processing. If you've invested into a rural project, you can expect that to take, 18 to 20 months. I think is depending again on the consulate. If you're in Abu Dhabi, for example, it's going to be way longer. For whatever reason, they're super backlogged at the consulate vis-a-vis, immigrant visa interviews. If you're inside the United States, I mean, we've seen clients get their green cards within 12 months. So it just depends on, if you've invested in a rural project, if you're doing consular processing, what embassy you're going to go through, and then if you're doing adjustment of status from inside the US.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much, George, and thank you to all the speakers. I hope we have given everyone a better understanding of the current EB-5 program in light of, the gold card, of which details are not yet known, full details are not yet known. But, please feel free to reach out to us for any, questions with regards to the program. We are here to help you. We work with, at Henley and Partners, I personally work with people like George, Min, and John, to really guide the family in making the best decision, especially for their family, for their children. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us. Thank you.